The Empire finally met humanity in battle. Now they understand the warnings. The massive Imperial flagship Eternal Dominance hung in space like a dark metal mountain. Admiral Zexathal stood on the command deck, his forearms clasped behind his back as he stared at the blue-green planet on the main screen. Earth. Such an unimpressive name for what would soon be the newest addition to the galactic hegemony. "Admiral, all ships report ready for the diplomatic mission," said Sub-Commander Vex, his voice carrying the usual military precision expected in the Imperial fleet. Zexthal nodded, the scales on his neck shimmering under the ship's lights. 10,000 years of expansion, and it's always the same. These primitives will bend the knee as all others have before them. The hegemony had detected unusual radio signals from this sector 3 Imperial cycles ago. Scout ships confirmed what they already suspected: another young species taking its first steps into space. Humans. According to reports, they had only reached their own moon less than a century ago. They had small colonies on their red neighbor planet and were just beginning to mine their asteroid belt. The Imperial Council dismissed them as insignificant, as they had with countless species before. Earth had resources. The hegemony needed resources. The equation was simple. "Ambassador Vreen's shuttle is prepared for departure," Vex reported. "Good. Let's follow protocol. Offer them the standard terms and we'll be harvesting this system within a cycle," Zexthal said. The small diplomatic vessel broke away from the Imperial fleet, which remained hidden behind the gas giant the humans called Jupiter. Protocol dictated a show of peaceful intentions before the inevitable conquest. It was more efficient that way. Most species surrendered immediately when they saw the full might of the hegemony. On Earth, alarm bells rang through the United Defense Coalition headquarters. Their deep space monitoring stations had detected the alien fleet days ago, though the vessels remained partially concealed behind Jupiter. "They're sending a single ship," said Kelly Martinez, the lead communications specialist, as she studied the readouts on her screen. Her dark hair was pulled back in a tight bun, and despite having been awake for nearly 20 hours, her eyes remained alert. Commander Liam Davis nodded, the weight of humanity's future heavy on his shoulders. At 45, he had spent his entire military career preparing for this moment, first contact with an alien civilization, but he had hoped for a more peaceful scenario. "Their positioning is tactical," he said. "They're hiding most of their ships. This isn't a friendly visit." UDC headquarters buzzed with activity as military leaders from around the world gathered in the crisis room. Screens displayed the approaching alien craft now passing Mars. "We've prepared the landing zone as requested in their transmission," said General Peter Gould. "Security teams are in place but displaying minimal weapons as they asked." The alien shuttle landed with precision in the designated area, a large empty field outside Geneva. The human delegation waited nervously as the ship's door opened with a hiss of escaping air. Ambassador Vreen emerged, a tall, slender alien with grayish-blue skin and large, multifaceted eyes. 2 attendants followed, carrying ornate cases that humans would later learn contained the terms of surrender. The meeting took place in a hastily prepared conference room. Kelly Martinez sat beside Commander Davis, struggling to operate the translation device the aliens had provided. Ambassador Vreen spoke in musical tones that the translator converted to flat, mechanical English. "The galactic hegemony welcomes Earth to the community of stars. We bring prosperity and order to all worlds under our protection." The words were pleasant, but the terms were not. As Vreen continued, the humans exchanged troubled glances. "In exchange for Imperial protection, Earth will provide a resource quota of 30% of all planetary mining operations, 25% of biological resources, and a conscription allowance of 500,000 humans per Earth year for labor and military service." Commander Davis leaned forward. "Ambassador Vreen, we appreciate your offer, but these terms are unacceptable. We wish to establish diplomatic relations as equals, not as subjects." The alien's multifaceted eyes blinked in what seemed like confusion. In 10,000 years of expansion, few species had rejected their initial terms. "Perhaps I have not made the alternative clear," Vreen said. "The hegemony's offer of protection is not optional. These terms are most generous for a species of your development level. Kelly Martinez spoke up, her voice firm despite her racing heart. We understand you have a powerful fleet, Ambassador, but humans don't respond well to threats. We would prefer to negotiate terms that benefit both our peoples. After 3 hours of increasingly tense discussion, Ambassador Vreen returned to his shuttle. The humans had not only refused to sign the surrender documents, but had proposed their own terms for mutual cooperation and trade. Back on the flagship, Admiral Zexthal listened to Vreen's report with growing irritation. They refused our terms. A species that barely has faster-than-light travel, he growled. They seem unusually stubborn, Admiral, Vreen replied. Their counteroffer was quite presumptuous. They speak as if they were equals. Zexthal moved to the tactical display, studying the small red dot that represented the humans' Mars colony. Then we follow standard procedure for reluctant species. Send a battle group to their outpost on the red planet. Destroy it completely. Once they understand our power, they will accept our terms. Within hours, 5 Imperial destroyers approached Mars. The small defense fleet stationed there, just 6 ships, moved to intercept. The battle lasted less than 30 minutes. The human vessels fought with unexpected ferocity, even ramming an Imperial ship when their weapons failed. But the outcome was never in doubt. The Mars colony, home to 30,000 scientists, miners, and their families, was reduced to rubble under the Imperial bombardment. The destroyers then returned to the main fleet, their mission accomplished. On Earth, the images from Mars arrived with a 20-minute delay, just long enough for the Imperial ships to complete their attack and retreat. The UDC headquarters fell silent as the screens showed the destruction of humanity's first major off-world colony. Commander Davis stood motionless, watching the feeds from the few surviving cameras. Behind him, someone was sobbing quietly. They just killed 30,000 civilians, Kelly whispered. As a demonstration, Davis turned to face the room full of military leaders. His voice was steady, but cold, with a rage that seemed to drop the temperature in the room. Send the message to all nations. As of this moment, Earth is at war, full mobilization. Every ship, every weapon, every resource we have goes toward one goal. He paused, looking at each face in the room. They came expecting us to kneel. They'll learn why that was a mistake. On the Imperial flagship, Admiral Zexthal prepared for the human surrender transmission. It would come soon, as it always did. The demonstration had never failed to bring a primitive species to heel, but no surrender came. Instead, Earth went silent. All broadcasts ceased. All communications ended. The blue-green planet simply waited. They'll break soon enough, Zexthal told his officers. Begin preparations for the ground invasion. 3 months should be sufficient to organize our forces. The Admiral had no way of knowing that those 3 months would be the biggest mistake in the hegemony's 10,000-year history. Humanity was not preparing to surrender. They were preparing to fight back in ways the Empire could never imagine. The Empire finally met humanity in battle. Now they understand the warnings. 3 months passed. The Imperial fleet orbited Jupiter, preparing for their final assault on Earth. Admiral Zexthal was pleased with the progress. 10,000 soldiers were ready for ground deployment. 50 warships waited for his command. Victory was certain. Strange that the humans remained silent, said Subcommander Vex as he reviewed the daily reports. No broadcasts, no messages, nothing since we showed them our power at Mars. Admiral Zexthal waved a dismissive hand. Fear does that to primitive species. They hide and hope will go away. He studied the tactical display showing Earth's solar system. We attack in one cycle. Begin moving supply ships forward. What the Admiral didn't know was that humans had spent those 3 months preparing in ways the Empire could never have predicted. Deep in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter, Captain Eric Wells floated in the control room of what used to be a mining vessel. Now it was something else entirely. Beside him, 20 men and women worked in silence, their eyes fixed on screens showing the Imperial supply convoy moving toward their position. Remember, Eric said quietly, we hit fast and we hit hard. Just like we practiced. The former mining ships had been stripped down, reinforced and armed with missiles originally designed to break apart asteroids. They weren't military vessels by any standard, but they had one advantage. The Empire didn't consider them a threat. "Lead ship passing checkpoint Alpha," said Jill Howard, Eric's second-in-command. Her hands moved steadily over the controls. Despite the fear everyone felt, Eric took a deep breath. "All ships execute Plan Hornet." 12 converted mining ships powered up and burst from their hiding places among the asteroids. The Imperial supply convoy, 5 large vessels with only 2 military escorts, had no time to react. The human ships swarmed around the convoy, their mining lasers and improvised missiles tearing into the Imperial vessels. Within minutes, 3 supply ships were crippled, leaking atmosphere and fuel into space. "Imperial escorts are turning to engage," Jill shouted. "All ships scatter. Rendezvous at Point Baker," Eric ordered. The human vessels broke formation and fled in different directions, weaving through the asteroid field with practiced precision. The Imperial escorts followed, but they were larger and less maneuverable. One of them clipped an asteroid and spun out of control. Back on the flagship, Admiral Zexthal received the news of the attack with disbelief. "Impossible," he growled. "Their ships were all accounted for." "They appear to be using modified civilian vessels, Admiral," reported the communications officer. 3 supply ships destroyed, another 2 damaged. This was not how primitives behaved. They were supposed to be cowering, preparing to surrender, not attacking Imperial convoys. "Increase escort patrols," the Admiral ordered, "and move up our timeline. We attack in 2 days." On Earth, Lieutenant Susan Carter sat in a darkened room filled with computers. Her eyes were red from lack of sleep, but a smile crossed her face as she typed the final command sequence. "Got it," she said to the room of engineers and computer specialists. "I'm in their communication network." General Peter Gould stepped closer to see her screen. "Can you disrupt their communications?" Susan's fingers flew over the keyboard. "Better than that. I can feed them false information. Their ships all receive automated navigation updates through this system." She looked up at the general. "We can send half their fleet in the wrong direction." The general placed a hand on her shoulder. "Do it." Across the solar system, a dozen other plans unfolded. In underground labs, scientists worked to understand the alien technology from recovered debris. In hidden shipyards, new weapons were mounted on Earth's limited fleet of space vessels. And far beyond the orbit of Pluto, something else was happening. Something the Empire would never expect. On the Imperial flagship, Admiral Zexthal was growing concerned. More supply ships had been lost. Communication between vessels was becoming unreliable. Strange contradictory orders were being received by his captains. "Someone is interfering with our system," said his chief technology officer. "These humans understand our technology better than they should." "They're animals with spacecraft," Zexthal snapped. "Fix the communications issue and prepare for the attack." A junior officer approached with a datapad. "Admiral, we've received a message from the Outer Rim. It's from Fleet Commander Krazathul." Zexthal frowned. Krazathul commanded the Empire's forces in a distant sector. What would he want? The message was simple. "Retreat while you still can. They don't fight like anyone else." "What nonsense is this?" the Admiral demanded. "Krazathul has never even encountered humans." "The message origin confirms it's from his command ship, sir," the officer said nervously. "Ignore it. Probably a communication error." The Admiral turned back to his battle plans, but a seed of doubt had been planted in his mind. The day of the attack arrived. The Imperial fleet moved toward Earth in perfect formation, ready to end this minor annoyance once and for all. That's when everything went wrong. As they approached Mars orbit, 20 Earth ships appeared from behind the red planet. They were military vessels, small but fast, and they moved in attack patterns the Empire had never seen before. "Evasive maneuvers," ordered Zexthal, as the first volley of Earth missiles streaked toward his fleet. The Imperial ships began to respond, but confusion spread through their ranks. Some captains received orders to advance, others to retreat. Navigation systems showed different positions for the same vessels, and then a new problem emerged. The Imperial ship's energy shields flickered and failed as they came under attack. Somehow the humans had found a frequency that disrupted the shields. Impossible, Zexthal whispered as he watched 5 of his ships explode in rapid succession. In a lab on Earth, Dr. Alan Green watched the battle through telescopes, a tired smile on his face. The shield disruptor works, he told the room of scientists. 3 months of reverse engineering their technology paid off. The space around Mars became a graveyard of Imperial vessels. What should have been an easy victory had turned into a disaster. The humans fought like nothing the Empire had ever seen. They used their smaller ships to draw Imperial fire, then struck from unexpected angles. They sacrificed vessels to protect others. They broke every rule of combat the Empire knew. Admiral Zexthal ordered a retreat, pulling his remaining ships back toward Jupiter. 1/3 of his fleet was gone, destroyed by a species that shouldn't have stood a chance. How? He demanded of his officers. How did they do this? No one had an answer. But as the damaged Imperial fleet regrouped, a new message arrived from Fleet Commander Krazthul. I warned you. They learn faster than any species we've encountered, and they never fight the way you expect. Now Zexthal understood why Earth had gone silent after the Mars attack. They hadn't been cowering in fear. They had been planning, adapting, preparing, and what the Admiral didn't know yet was that this was just the beginning. While he retreated to Jupiter to repair his fleet, the next phase of humanity's plan was already in motion. Far beyond the solar system, small, fast human ships had slipped past Imperial patrols with a mission the Empire could never have anticipated. The war had just begun, and the warnings about humanity were proving true in ways that would soon shake the galactic hegemony to its core. The Empire finally met humanity in battle. Now they understand the warnings. 6 months had passed since first contact. Admiral Zexthal stood before a display showing the remains of his once mighty fleet. Only 30 ships remained operational. Out of the original 50, the humans had proven far more dangerous than anyone could have predicted. Admiral, the xenopsychology report you requested has arrived, said Subcommander Vex, offering a data pad. Zexthal took it with one of his 4 hands, his scales darkening with stress as he read. The Imperial scientists had been studying human behavior, trying to understand how this primitive species had managed to inflict such damage on the hegemony forces. This can't be right, he muttered. The report explained that humans had evolved as persistence predators. While most intelligent species in the galaxy evolved from herd animals or specialized hunters, humans had developed the ability to track prey for days, never giving up, until their exhausted targets simply collapsed. This evolutionary trait had shaped their psychology in ways the Empire had never encountered before. They don't have a surrender response, Zexthal said with growing horror. Most species have a point where they accept defeat to preserve the group. Humans just keep fighting. On Earth, the United Defense Coalition had transformed into a unified war machine. Old national rivalries had been set aside in the face of extinction. Every factory, laboratory, and shipyard worked toward one goal: survival. Lisa Summers led her Marine squad through the corridors of their training facility. At 28, she had already become something of a legend among Earth's defense forces after leading a boarding action against an Imperial scout ship and capturing it intact. The aliens think in straight lines, she told her soldiers as they prepared for their next mission. They expect us to retreat when outnumbered. They expect us to attack in force when we have an advantage. They expect us to follow rules. She smiled grimly. So we don't do any of that. Her unit specialized in boarding actions. With Earth still outnumbered in ship-to-ship combat, the strategy was to capture Imperial vessels rather than destroy them. It was dangerous work, but it was working. In an underground facility beneath what had once been a university campus, engineer Frank Rodriguez made final adjustments to Project Nemesis. 6 captured Imperial ships sat in the massive chamber, their hulls partially disassembled as human technicians worked to understand and adapt the alien technology. The shield modification is ready for testing, Frank told General Peter Gould, who had come to observe their progress. They watched as technicians activated the modified shield generator. It hummed to life, creating a protective bubble around one of Earth's own ships. The power requirement is still high, Frank explained, but we can protect our vessels now. And more importantly, we know exactly how to disable theirs. General Gould nodded with satisfaction. How soon can we outfit the fleet? 2 weeks for the first 10 ships. After that, maybe 5 ships per week as we refine the process. The general's face remained serious. Good work. We've just received word that the Empire has called for reinforcements. Our deep space probes detected a large fleet heading toward our system. We need every advantage we can get. On the Imperial flagship, Admiral Zexthal received a disturbing report from the outer reaches of the solar system. The small outpost they had established on a moon of Neptune had gone silent. Probably a equipment failure, suggested one of his officers. The Admiral wasn't convinced. Send a scout ship to investigate. The scout ship never returned. Instead, 3 days later, they detected a small fleet of Earth vessels emerging from the direction of Neptune. They were using Imperial technology, modified and adapted to human designs. How did they get past our outpost? Demanded Zexthal. Tiu Yao's answer came shortly afterward as their long-range sensors detected activity near their outpost. It wasn't destroyed. It had been captured. The humans were using it as their own forward base. In the void of space near the asteroid belt, Commander Jason Palmer prepared his small fleet for what would become a turning point in the war. 10 Earth ships, newly equipped with the adapted shield technology, moved into position behind a cluster of large asteroids. The Imperial supply fleet is approaching, reported his second-in-command Greg Fisher. 15 ships with heavy escort this time. They're learning. Jason nodded, but not fast enough. All ships prepare to execute Maneuver Trojan. What the Empire didn't know was that the asteroid field had been modified. For months, mining teams had placed small thrusters on key asteroids, allowing them to be moved slightly. Not enough to be noticed, but enough to create a trap. As the Imperial fleet entered the asteroid field along their usual path, Jason gave the order. The thrusters activated, shifting dozens of massive rocks toward the Imperial ships. At the same time, the Earth vessels emerged from hiding, weapons firing. Caught between the closing asteroids and the human attack, the Imperial fleet broke formation. 3 supply ships and 2 warships were crushed by the moving asteroids. The others found themselves in a chaotic situation their training had never prepared them for. Jason's voice was calm as he directed the battle. Concentrate fire on their flagship. Boarding teams stand by. The battle lasted less than an hour. When it was over, 8 Imperial ships had been destroyed, 4 captured, and only 3 had escaped. It was the single largest defeat the Empire had suffered in over 100 years. Admiral Zexthal received the news with growing dread. The loss of another supply fleet meant his remaining ships would soon face fuel and ammunition shortages. But even more concerning were the reports that the humans had adapted Imperial shield technology to their own vessels. They learned too quickly, he told his officers during an emergency meeting. At this rate, they'll match our technology in less than a year. The reinforcement fleet will arrive in 3 months, reminded Sub-Commander Vex. We just need to hold our position until then. But the Admiral was no longer certain even reinforcements would be enough. He pulled up the mysterious message from Fleet Commander Krazathul again. Retreat while you still can. They don't fight like anyone else. Now he understood what Krazathul meant. The humans didn't just fight differently, they thought differently. They adapted, improvised, and seemed to grow stronger from every defeat. The Empire's strength had always been its unchanging order and discipline. Against most enemies, this was an advantage. Against humans, it was becoming a fatal weakness. As if confirming his fears, a new report arrived. Human ships had been detected beyond the solar system, attacking Imperial outposts in neighboring systems. Somehow, they had stolen the technology. For faster-than-light travel, and were expanding the war. In a secure room deep beneath Earth's surface, the leaders of the United Defense Coalition looked at a star map showing the galactic hegemony's territory. Small red dots indicated the human strikes beyond their solar system. General Peter Gould addressed the assembled leaders. Phase 1 was defense. Phase 2 was counterattack. He pointed to the vast swath of Imperial territory on the map. Phase 3 begins now. We take the war to them. The Empire had awakened something it didn't understand. Humanity wasn't fighting just for survival anymore. They were fighting to ensure this never happened again. And the galaxy was about to change, forever. The Empire finally met humanity in battle. Now they understand the warnings. 1 Earth year had passed since the Imperial fleet first entered the solar system. What was meant to be a simple conquest had turned into the greatest crisis the galactic hegemony had faced in thousands of years. Admiral Zexthal looked much older now. His once bright scales had dulled, and his posture showed the weight of repeated defeats. He stood before the holographic projection of the Imperial Council, 7 ancient beings who ruled over thousands of worlds. The situation has become untenable, Zexthal reported. The humans have captured 23 of our vessels. They've adapted our technology and improved upon it in ways our scientists didn't think possible. They've launched attacks on 6 Imperial outposts beyond their solar system. He paused, gathering his courage. I formally request permission to negotiate peace terms. The council members exchanged glances. The oldest among them, High Counselor Drav, leaned forward. Denied, Admiral. The Empire does not negotiate with primitives. The reinforcement fleet will arrive in 3 weeks. You will hold your position until then. The transmission ended, leaving Zexthal alone with his thoughts. The council didn't understand. They hadn't seen what he had seen. The humans weren't just fighting back. They were transforming themselves into something the galaxy had never witnessed before. On Earth, in a massive underground hangar, Nicole Harrison walked around her creation with pride. At 35, she had been a brilliant but unknown engineer before the war. Now she led the team that had designed humanity's newest weapon, the Retribution-class destroyer, she explained to the military leaders who had come to witness the unveiling. It combines Imperial shield technology with our own weapon systems, but the real breakthrough is the drive system. The ship was smaller than Imperial vessels but sleeker, designed for speed and maneuverability rather than brute force. 10 of these ships were nearly complete, with more under construction in similar facilities around the world. General Daniel Ross studied the vessel with a critical eye. How does it compare to their ships? Nicole smiled. In computer simulations, 1 Retribution can take on 3 Imperial destroyers and win. They designed their technology for efficiency and consistency. We designed ours to be unpredictable and adaptable. The general nodded. When will they be ready for the battle at Saturn? 10 days, Nicole replied. Just in time to greet their reinforcements. The rings of Saturn had become the new front line. Earth's intelligence, gathered through captured Imperial communications and scout ships, had revealed that the reinforcement fleet would arrive near Saturn, where they would join with Zexthal's remaining forces before launching a final assault on Earth. Human forces had been preparing for this moment. The entire defense strategy now centered on preventing those fleets from joining. Commander Jason Palmer had been promoted after his victory in the asteroid belt. Now he stood on the bridge of Earth's flagship, the Unity, reviewing battle plans with his officers. The Retribution destroyers will lead the attack, he explained, pointing to the tactical display. Our captured Imperial vessels will hang back until the enemy is committed. He looked around at the serious faces watching him. Make no mistake, this will be the largest space battle in human history. But we have one advantage they don't. What's that, sir? Asked one of his junior officers. Jason's face was grim but determined. Everything to lose. In his private quarters aboard the Imperial flagship, Admiral Zexthal made a decision. Against direct orders, he opened a secure channel to Earth's Defense Command. When General Daniel Ross appeared on the screen, both leaders studied each other in silence for a moment. General Ross, the Admiral finally spoke. I wish to discuss the possibility of ending this conflict before more lives are lost on both sides. The General's expression remained neutral. The last time we attempted diplomacy, you destroyed our Mars colony and killed 30,000 civilians. Why should we trust you now? Because I have seen enough to know this war cannot be won, Zexthal replied honestly. Not by us. Not as we are. Before they could continue, alarms blared throughout the Imperial ship. The Admiral cut the transmission and rushed to the command deck. The reinforcement fleet has arrived early, reported Subcommander Vex. They're taking heavy fire from human forces near Saturn's rings. The massive view screen showed the battle unfolding. The Imperial reinforcement, fleet, 60 ships strong, had emerged from faster-than-light travel directly into an ambush. New human vessels, unlike any they had seen before, darted between the larger Imperial ships, their weapons cutting through shields that should have been impenetrable. How did they know exactly where our fleet would emerge? Zexthal wondered, aloud. The answer came moments later as several ships in the reinforcement fleet suddenly turned their weapons on their companions. They weren't Imperial vessels at all. They were captured ships piloted by humans who had infiltrated the gathering point for the reinforcements. All ships moved to assist, ordered Zexthal, but even as he gave the command, he knew they would be too late. The Battle of Saturn's rings lasted just under 5 hours. When it ended, the reinforcement fleet had been decimated. Of 60 ships, only 23 remained operational, and those were retreating in disarray. The human losses were significant as well, but they had achieved their objective, preventing the two Imperial fleets from combining their strength. Admiral Zexthal watched the reports come in with a growing sense that he was witnessing the end of an era. For 10,000 years, the hegemony had expanded unchallenged. Now, in just 1 year, a single species on a single planet had brought that expansion to a halt. His communications officer interrupted his thoughts. Admiral, we're receiving strange reports from Imperial outposts in neighboring sectors. What kind of reports? Uprisings, sir. On at least 12 worlds. Subject species are revolting against Imperial control and... The officer hesitated. They're using human tactics. This was worse than Zexthal had feared. Somehow, the humans had made contact with other species under Imperial rule. They weren't just defending their world anymore. They were spreading their ideas of resistance throughout the Empire. A final message arrived from Fleet Commander Krazathul. It's too late. The humans don't just want to win, they want to change everything. Now Zexthal understood the true danger. The hegemony had ruled through fear and the belief that resistance was futile. The humans had shattered that belief not just for themselves, but potentially for every subjugated species in the galaxy. On Earth, General Ross met with the United Defense Coalition leadership to report on the victory at Saturn. The Battle of Saturn's rings has given us a window, he explained. Their reinforcements are scattered. Admiral Zexthal's fleet is isolated, and our operatives report growing unrest throughout Imperial territory. President Laura Bennett, who had led Earth's political response to the invasion, asked the question everyone was thinking. What's our next move? General Ross pointed to a star map showing the heart of the hegemony. We've learned the location of their capital world. It's time to take this fight to the Imperial Council itself. The room fell silent as everyone absorbed the audacity of this plan. 1 year ago, humanity had been confined to their own solar system, facing extinction. Now they were planning to strike at the heart of a 10,000-year-old empire. The next phase of the war was about to begin, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The Empire finally met humanity in battle. Now they understand the warnings. 18 months after first contact, Admiral Zexthal stood before the Imperial Council on their capital world, Zentrix Prime. The Grand Chamber, with its towering columns and ancient symbols of power, had hosted countless victory celebrations over 10,000 years. Today, it witnessed something entirely different. You have failed the Empire, Admiral, said High Counselor Drav, his voice echoing through the chamber. The human problem should have been resolved within days. Zexthal had once feared these ancient beings. Now he simply felt pity for their blindness. The humans were never a problem to be solved, he replied. They are unlike any species we have encountered in our history. His words were interrupted by a junior officer who rushed into the chamber, breaking all protocols of imperial decorum. Forgive me, counselors, but we've detected a large fleet entering the system. They've bypassed all our outer defenses, displays, around the chamber activated, showing dozens of ships approaching Zentrix Prime. Some were clearly of human design, others were modified imperial vessels. Most shocking of all were ships belonging to various subject species of the Empire. Impossible, whispered one of the counselors. How could they reach our capital so quickly? How could they know its location? An archivist hurried forward with an ancient data crystal. Counselors, I found something in the oldest archives, something about the humans. The crystal was inserted into a reader and ancient text scrolled across the main display. The records dated back to the early days of the Empire, nearly 10,000 years ago. The species on the third planet of the yellow star must not be approached. Read High Counselor Drav, his voice growing weaker with each word. Their world is to be marked as quarantined. They are chaos bringers who would choose death over subjugation. The Empire must never awaken the humans. The chamber fell silent as the implications became clear. The humans were not unknown to the Empire. They had been deliberately avoided, their existence buried in ancient warnings that had been forgotten, over millennia of bureaucracy and expansion. We awakened them, Zexthal said quietly, and now they have awakened others. On the bridge of the Earth flagship Unity, Admiral Olivia Bennett watched the Imperial capital grow larger on the main screen. At 45, she had spent most of her career in administrative roles before the war. Now she commanded the largest fleet humans had ever assembled. All ships report ready, said her second-in-command, Captain Paul Wright. Our allies are in position as well. The allies were something no one on Earth could have imagined 18 months ago. Representatives from 12 different alien species served aboard human ships. All had been subjects of the Empire. All had joined the fight for freedom after making contact with human operatives. Open a channel to the Imperial capital, ordered Admiral Bennett. Her face appeared on screens throughout Zentrix Prime, including in the council chamber. I am Admiral Olivia Bennett of Earth. We do not come solely as conquerors, but as liberators. The Empire's time of absolute rule is over. In orbit around the capital, the battle began. The Imperial home fleet was vast, but many of its crews had never seen actual combat. They had been stationed at the heart of the Empire, far from any real threat. They faced human ships whose crews were veterans of a year of constant warfare, who had adapted and evolved with each battle, and the humans weren't fighting alone. Ships from species long oppressed by the Empire joined the attack, their crews fighting with the desperation of those who had glimpsed freedom for the first time. While the space battle raged, dropships descended to the surface of Zentrix Prime. Marine squads led by Lisa Summers secured key facilities. They met resistance, but it was disorganized and ineffective. The Empire had never expected an enemy to reach their capital. In the council chamber, Admiral Zexthal watched impassively as human soldiers entered. Their weapons were raised but disciplined, not firing unless fired upon. The council is under the protection of the Galactic Hegemony, declared High Counselor Drav. Any action against us is punishable by death. A human woman stepped forward. Dr. Karen Price had been an anthropologist before the war. Now she served as Earth's chief diplomat to the alien species who had joined their cause. The hegemony no longer dictates punishment or protection, she said. We're here to negotiate the terms of your surrender and the formation of a new galactic community. High Counselor Drav looked bewildered. You cannot simply end 10,000 years of order. The galaxy needs the Empire's guidance. Karen smiled. What the galaxy needs is freedom to choose its own path. The species you've controlled for millennia will now have that choice. Within hours, the battle was over. The Imperial home fleet surrendered when news spread that the Council had been captured. Across the galaxy, Imperial governors and administrators found themselves facing uprisings they couldn't contain. 1 month later, representatives from 100 worlds gathered in the former council chamber. The room had been redesigned, replacing the raised platform where the councilors had sat with a circular arrangement where all delegates sat as equals. President Ryan Clark of Earth addressed the gathering. Today marks the founding of the Galactic Cooperative, not an empire built on domination, but a community built on mutual respect and cooperation. Admiral Zexthal, now representing the former Imperial core worlds, nodded in reluctant acknowledgement. He had come to understand what the ancient warnings had meant. Humans didn't just fight differently, they dreamed differently. Where the Empire saw only order through control, humans imagined freedom through cooperation. The remaining Imperial loyalists had retreated to a handful of core worlds, their power and influence broken forever. The 10,000-year reign of the galactic hegemony had ended in less than 2 Earth years. On Mars, the colony destroyed at the beginning of the war had been rebuilt. New domes gleamed in the red sunlight, and streets bustled with activity. At the center of the main plaza stood a simple memorial. People from Earth and a dozen alien worlds gathered around it during the dedication ceremony. Admiral Olivia Bennett unveiled the monument. It was a piece of twisted metal from the original colony mounted on a stone base. A simple inscription read, "They came expecting surrender. They learned why humanity was feared. They understood the warnings too late." As the ceremony ended, a small group toured the new research facility nearby. Dr. Karen Price explained the significance to representatives from former subject worlds of the Empire. "This is why we fought," she said, gesturing to scientists of various species working side by side. Not just to survive, but to create something better together. One of the alien delegates, a tall being with iridescent skin, asked the question. Many still wondered, what makes humans different? Why were you able to defeat an empire that ruled for 10,000 years? Karen considered the question carefully. Perhaps it's because throughout our history, we've always imagined better worlds than the ones we lived in. The Empire built a galaxy based on what was. Humanity dreams of what could be. As they looked out over the Martian landscape, ships from a dozen worlds passed overhead, carrying the seeds of a new galactic civilization. The Empire had finally met humanity in battle, and in doing so had fulfilled the ancient warnings and changed the course of galactic history forever.